Carol Burnett is without a doubt a television icon, right? Her impact on sketch comedy and variety shows are legendary.
Max?
Yes, madam.
Is there someone there?
Yes, madam.
Good.
I'll put it to you this way. Without her, you probably don't have a Saturday Night Live or a Kids in the Hall or an In Living Color. Carol Burnett paved the way for many of today's Hollywood stars, and what a life she has led. Let's go back to the beginning. So, Carol was born in San Antonio, Texas, and there was a bit of a struggle with her parents. Both of them battled with alcohol addiction. So when Carol was 3, she was actually taken away from her parents, and she moved in with her grandmother. Now, the two of them actually moved to Hollywood, and they were inseparable. They went to movies together. In fact, afterwards, Carol would act out the scenes of those movies on the roof of their apartment. Her and her nanny were so close that, you remember that little ear tug? Well, that was a little nod to her grandma. All right, so after high school, she went to UCLA, right? She studied acting there, but of course, a lot of the work was in New York City. So after she graduated in '54, Burnett headed to the Big Smoke and just got a whole bunch of acting gigs. You know, she did some TV stuff, worked with Jack Parr and Ed Sullivan, also hit it big on Broadway. She was one of the stars of the hit show called Once Upon a Mattress. Back to television, a variety show called The Gary Moore Show. And soon, she was a full-time cast member. People started to see that Carol Burnett was versatile, and she was doing things that other women weren't doing on television. So, after much consternation, in 1967, CBS gave her her own program. It was called The Carol Burnett Show.
Starlet, I love you. That gown is gorgeous.
Thank you. I saw it in the window and I just couldn't resist it.
Now, together with Harvey Korman, Tim Conway, and Vicki Lawrence, Carol made television history. What carried the Burnett Show into the hearts and the homes of America was the good feeling chemistry between the cast and the versatility of Carol Burnett. That show ran for 11 years, won 25 Emmy Awards, and Carol was, without a doubt, the pioneer for women in comedy and entertainment. So even though that show ended in 1978, courtesy of syndication and reruns, many generations have seen what Carol and company pulled off.
Well, so long.
Carol is now on tour in Canada with her latest show called Laughter and Reflection with Carol Burnett. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Oh, it's so great to be here.
It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
You walked in and you got a standing ovation, and you weren't even funny yet. You got it before.
Well, I should leave now. Then I'm a little nervous about that.
You're going on the road and you're doing a long Q&A. You're kind of doing what a lot of
Yes,
people got to
yeah.
see you do on television. What's it like to be on the road and answering those questions
Well,
again?
it's terrific. I go out in front of the audience and I do 90 minutes of just bump up the lights, and if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, and it's all random. And I never know when anybody's going to ask, so it really keeps the gray matter working. You know, that's really fun and why I do it.
What's the weirdest question you've ever gotten? Now, keep in mind, this is 11 o'clock, and it's also Canadian, not American television, so you can say whatever you want.
Well, it was weird. This woman, it was in Texas. Well, of course, that kind of goes the way it should. In Texas. Anyway, she was up in the balcony, and I saw her, and she was raising her hand. And I said, "Yes, the lady in the pink." And she said, "Carol, if you could be a member of the opposite sex for 24 hours and then pop back into being yourself again, who would you be and what would you do?"
Wow.
I'm thinking, oh, look, would I want to be Cary Grant? But if I was Cary Grant, then what would I do? And my mind was going a mile a minute. And then I just said to my higher power, I said, "Whatever comes out, dear God, it's your fault." And I said, I'd be Osama bin Laden and I'd kill myself.
Good answer. Wow. I bet you if somebody came up with a list of 1 million people, Carol Burnett would say Osama would not make that list.
That's for sure.
Now, did you thank God or blame God for that answer?
No, I thank God for that answer, yeah.
But think of this, you're actually from Texas, right?
Yes, I am.
Born in San Antonio.
San Antonio.
And then you're really young and you made the move to Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I was 7, back in the covered wagon days.
When we're watching all that footage back of your career and all the things, man, what a long, strange trip it must have been for you, especially considering that when you were a little girl living with your grandmother, you guys were so broke that you would steal cutlery and salt and pepper from restaurants and toilet paper from bathrooms. And, I mean, what kind of mark did that leave on you, those early days with your grandma?
Well, it just meant when we would go to the movies, for instance, my grandmother would say, "Okay, now let's hit the stalls before we go home." And so she had this huge bag, and we'd come home with the toilet. So I just figured we'd be set for another month, and we would do, and then we'd go to Thrifty's drugstore and sit at the counter and have soda or something like that. And then she'd look around, she'd have this purse and just put everything into it. Spoons, the forks, the knives, salt and pepper shakers, all of that.
You must have had a hell of a collection.
Ketchup, too.
Really? When you were a kid and you see that going on, I mean, what was going through your mind?
Well, we didn't have any money, so she just said that's the way to go about it, and she was right. I mean, I don't mean it's right to steal, but that wasn't that big a deal. We didn't go to banks.
Right. Or at least if you did, that wouldn't make it in the book, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot is made. We sort of saw the thing, the ear tug off the top. And,
Yeah.
I mean, your grandmother, your nanny.
That was for my grandmother.
Just for people who maybe don't know the story, I mean, she's a huge. She raised you.
Yes.
Practically, right?
Yes. My
Tell
grandmother.
me about her.
Oh, well, she was I lived with her in Texas, and my mom and dad had moved to California to see if they could make their fortune, which it didn't happen. And so my grandmother and I followed my mother out to California about a few months later, and she and my dad had parted. And so Mama lived down the hall in one place, and then she'd gotten Nanny, my grandmother and me, a room just around the corner from where she was. Down the hall. And so we had a one room and with a Murphy pull-down bed, which never went back up into the wall because my grandmother was always lying down on it and saying, "I don't know if I can live another day." And she was always feeling her pulse. But what was funny was she was a Christian Scientist. And she was a hypochondriacal Christian Scientist. So she'd say, "Okay, now, as they say in Christian Science, know the truth for me," which means, you're not going to be ill and everything's going to be fine. And so I'd be a little girl and I'd be doing that, And then she'd say, "Go get me an aspirin." So it was like, so I got mixed messages and stuff. Yeah. And but then I found out years later when I was writing an autobiography or a memoir, I should say, I found out I'd known that she'd been married 3 times. That I knew, and then I found out that she'd been married 6 times.
That's double.
That is double. Yeah, found out that. And then she was quite the coquette, evidently, as a young woman, And so she had actually seduced her second husband, who was, she had taught him piano lessons. And he was quite a bit younger. And he eloped to Texas from Arkansas, and his mother came and got him. Yeah.
I really like your grandmother.
Well, when she died at 81, she had a 41-year-old boyfriend who was a jazz musician from Redondo Beach. But one of my favorite stories about her was she didn't really want me to go to New York, or she said, show business, you're not going to make it, it's too hard, and New York is cold, and your blood's too thin, you'll be dead in a week. And, and all of this. Finally, though, I did go to New York. I went and I started to get some work on television. Well, she changed her tune completely, when that happened, and I got on the Gary Moore show, and so things were really cooking for me. And she now would tell everybody she was my grandmother, and she knew everybody in Hollywood, and she would even call the trade papers like Hollywood Reporter and the Variety, and she'd say, well, why wasn't Carol in the paper today? She's doing this thing over here and with Gary Moore, and now May, her name was May, and we know we're on the case, and they loved her. Anyway, she had a very mild heart attack, and I talked to the doctor, and he said she's fine. You don't have to come out. We're going to release her in a couple of days. She's just fine. So my cousin went to visit her, and I got this from my cousin, and she opened the doors opened for the elevator to the hospital floor where Nanny was, and my cousin saw all of these people lined up in various kinds of costumes leading up to Nanny's door. And so my cousin opened the door, and there was a little girl in a tutu doing a toe tap and with a baton, and her father was in the corner playing on a harmonica. The kid finished in a split, and my grandmother said, "Thank you, I'll tell Carol about you. Now send in the next."
Figure out more with Carol Burnett when we come back.
I'd always wanted a chin.
Do you mean like a literal chin?
Yeah,
You have a fine chin, Carol.
I do now. We're not having hot mush today.
Yay!
We're having cold mush.
Oh, yeah.
What?
We love you, Miss Hannigan.
Wonderful.
Back here on the hour, hanging out with Carol Burnett. Just saw a clip of Miss Hannigan. There's a whole group of people who know you from the Carol Burnett show, some before, some of the work you did. You worked on all the talk shows. You worked with Jack Parr and all those people, but there's a whole group who know you just as Miss Hannigan.
That's right,
from
little
Orphan
kids.
Annie.
Yeah.
What was that? That show must have been fun to be a part of.
I love doing it, to do a musical, and one of my best buddies is Bernadette Peters, and she was in it, and to work with Tim Curry and Albert Finney and all. And to work for John Huston, the director, was amazing, But
John Huston, he also went to the same high school as you. Didn't he also go to Hollywood High? I think a whole bunch of them went to Hollywood High, didn't
yeah, but he was way ahead of me.
Yeah, way ahead.
But I have a story about Annie. We were doing this thing called Easy Street, this number. Easy Street, Easy Street. And in the Broadway show, it was done only by the three villains in the orphanage. And that was it was a showstopper. It was great. So this being a movie, they wanted to open it all up, and they had 400 dancers and on the street, and we'd go up and down fire escapes, and both Bernadette and Tim Curry and I were doing. We said, this is not working. This is not working. And so they finished shooting it. Took a week. And I went back to where I lived, and Bernadette went back to New York, and Tim went to England. And I had decided that when I finished, I was going to, I'd always wanted a chin.
Do you mean like a literal chin?
Yeah,
You have a fine chin, Carol.
I do now. I was kind of had always a weak chin, and I always felt funny doing a profile thing or anything. And there was this oral surgeon in Honolulu who was very good, and he said he could fix it by just kind of cutting in here and bringing it out, like 2 or 3 millimeters. That's all I wanted, you know, and just so I'd have something to, you know, like when it rained, I'd like to feel it. So I got a chin. Now, about a month later, I get a phone call from the producer of Annie, and he said, we're going to reshoot the Easy Street number, and we're going to have it with just the 3 of you in the thing. And I said, well, Ray, I have a chin now. And he said, what? And I explained, and he said, oh, with all that Miss Hannigan drag on it, you know, also, nobody will notice, and it's not going to be picture to picture. We'll do the number, and then there'll be other scenes, and people won't. So now we come back, we re-rehearse it, we're in the orphanage, and we're getting ready to shoot, and Mr. Houston, John, said, well, we were in Miss Hannigan's office, going to start the number. He said, I'd like to start back, actually, from when Carol went into the closet to find the locket that belongs to Annie, and we'll pick it up when she comes out of the closet. So I went up to, I said, Mr. Houston. He said, what are you going to call me, John? You know, I said, John. 2 months ago, when I ran into the closet, I didn't have a chin. Now I'm coming out of the closet, and I have, and he thought for a minute, and he said, well, dear, just come out looking determined. Wow. That's awesome. My favorite piece of direction I ever got. I mean, was that funny?
It's amazing. But Annie is an important movie and musical for anybody, but certainly for little girls.
Yes.
When they see that. And,
Yeah.
and you know, we talked a lot about your grandmother, and we hear about you as this trailblazer, this legendary character for women, a legendary performer for women. And I wondered, what was it about, when you were growing up, did you get lessons? Did your mother and did your grandmother tell you about what it was like when you were growing up? Here's what a woman, because you were there at a time.
No.
When we went to secretary, nothing?
No. When I wanted to go to UCLA to study, and it cost too much money. And my grandmother wanted me to go to a secretarial school. She said, because if you learn to be a good secretary, you get a good job, and then maybe someday you could nab the boss.
So then, was there ever, when they called you the Trailblazer, were you aware at the time that that's what you were doing?
No, not at all. Not at all. I remember I had it in the contract with CBS, however, that I could do a variety show, an hour variety show, as opposed to a half-hour sitcom. And I had 5 years to let them know if I wanted to do something like that while I was doing other things for CBS. And so the 5 years were almost up, and I made the call to CBS, and I said, I think I'd like to push that button and do a variety show. And they had totally forgotten. And they said, what? I said, the hour variety show. And this was a week between Christmas and New Year's, so I think they got a lot of lawyers out of Christmas parties that night, and they called back the next day, and his name was Mike Dan. And he said, well, Carol, yeah, we see that, the hour variety. You know, though, that's really a man's game. You know, that's, he said, look, there's no women, I mean, Dinah Shore did a musical variety show, but comedy variety, that's Jackie Gleason, it's Caesar, it's Dean Martin, it's, you know, on and on. I said, but that's all I know, and I want to have music, I want to have guest stars, I want to do sketches, I want to have a rep company, you know, like Sid Caesar and so forth. And he said, but we have this terrific script that it's a half-hour sitcom. It's just, it'd be great for you. It's called Here's Agnes. So, but they had to put it on, and we didn't know that it was going to last or anything. And all I did was just get up there and be the goof that I was on the Gary Moore show, and have our beloved Tim Conway and Harvey Korman and Vicky.
The thing about that show, I mean, aside from the fact that there was a lot of characters and funny bits, was the relationship between all of you. Half the time, even when the bits weren't being executed properly, the funniest part was when you just made each other laugh.
Well,
like that was the biggest part of that show.
That was Conway.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was Conway. We never wanted to break up. I mean, all of us. Harvey was a consummate, actor and so forth, but he was, it was Tim's goal in life to destroy Harvey. So we would do 2 shows on a Friday, the dress rehearsal and the air show, with 2 different audiences, and Tim would be just perfect on the dress rehearsal.
Like he'd stick to the script?
Stick to the script, on all, and then he'd ask the director if he got all the shots fine, then off he would go on the air show. And sometimes when it was a sketch between him and Harvey, all he would have to do at the beginning would be to do that to Harvey. Just look at Harvey go. Harvey was gone. There was it was impossible.
We'll come back, we'll talk more with Carol Burnett. And obviously we lost Harvey Korman last year. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more. Carol Burnett on the hour.
I always felt it very important to have people to work with who are better than you are. It's like playing tennis with somebody that's better. It's going to make your game better. And that's what Harvey did for me.
Novocaine. Here we are, Novocaine. Take a firm hold of the hypodermic needle. Right. There'll be a little bit of pain, and then numbness will set in.
Carol Burnett here on the hour. Tim Conway, Harvey Korman, doing what they did best. You were still in touch, I know, in later years after the Carol Burnett show left television. You guys went back on the road and you did the show.
Well, I didn't go on the road with Tim and Harvey. Tim and Harvey went on the road together, yeah.
And they played some of those characters that they love so much.
Oh, yeah.
And we just lost Harvey. I mean, you were pretty close to them, right?
We lost him a year ago. Oh, it was like a brother. And as I say, he was a consummate actor. He had the comedy chops of there's nobody. Maybe there's somebody as good as Harvey, but I've never worked or seen anybody better. He was. I always put him on a pedestal because he deserved it. And it was like I always felt very important to have people to work with who are better than you are. It's like playing tennis with somebody that's better. It's going to make your game better. And that's what Harvey did for me. Whenever I was with him, I grew up to, I grew up to his level as often as I could.
The thing about your show is that growing up watching it with my family as a young boy, I just thought it was a funny show. Years later, I found out when I talked to girls I know, especially girls who are in the business, you gave them, you showed the networks and people that it was okay for girls to be silly on TV. Did you have an idea that was happening while you were doing it?
Nope. I never tried to analyze any of that, really. I just got up and was silly. And I wasn't thinking, gee, this is going to help a lot of other girls be silly.
But after the fact, you recognize that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of conversations do you have with people? I'm sure you meet plenty in the business now who grew up watching your show and talk about the impact your show had on them.
Well, they ask, a lot of people ask why can't there be more television like that today? Because at one time when we were doing our show, there were 9 variety shows. There was us and the Smothers Brothers and Sonny and Cher, Glenn Campbell, Flip Wilson, Laugh-In, Dean Martin. It was a fantastic group of comedy writers and comedic performers and so forth. And you don't see that much anymore. And, it's all kind of reality shows. And a lot of the humor gets a little mean, a little what they call edgy. And which is fine. But there's also something to say about, you saw the clip of Tim with the dentist, the dentist. So that holds up today. Now that's about 40 years old, that sketch. And you see that today, that whole sketch. You're gonna laugh just as much as you did the first time you saw it. There's nothing like a good belly laugh. And I kind of miss seeing that on television.
When the curtain came down to the Carol Burnett show, finally, what were you thinking? When the lights came down that last time?
Oh, well, it was my decision to leave in the 11th year. Harvey had left to do a television show. He left after 10 years, and Tim and Vicki hung on, and I just kind of missed Harvey, and then I saw that sometimes some of the sketches we were doing were almost repeating some of the things we might have done in the 7th year or the 8th year. So, and I said, I don't want to stay here and wait for the network to go, bye. I felt it was better to leave before I was asked.
A comedian is an artist, but some musicians have a moment where they're able to write the kinds of songs that seem to connect with an audience and make these great records, and as time goes on, it's harder for some musicians, to find that song again. Yeah. Can the same be said for an artist? Can a comedian sit there and go, I can't write the jokes the way I used to write the jokes?
Well, at times, but it was the material. If I got material that was new and fresh and funny, we could make it funnier. And that was what we were always looking for, And but there's nothing harder, I don't think, professionally, in the business, than it would be to be a comedy writer. That's pretty tough.
Well, they always say, right, it's not funny, it's comedy.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, thankfully, because of this audience, we never have to worry about not getting a laugh. But when you guys were out there doing your bit, and there wasn't a laugh.
Oh.
What was that like, aside from that?
Well, there was one time we were doing a sketch called Mary Worthless. And it was a takeoff on the Mary Worth character, the little lady who was always a busybody and getting into everybody's business and so forth. And I was going to be Mary Worthless, and we were thinking that she could be a running character, perhaps every other week or so, if she worked. And so we started doing the sketch, and it was bombing. By that, I mean bad. Woof. Whoa.
Just like crickets in the studio?
No, I'm telling you, the audience was an oil painting. They were looking at, and finally we get to the end, of the sketch, and I'm supposed to say into the camera, now, make sure that you keep watching because pretty soon maybe Mary Worthless will be coming into your home, you know, because she wrecked this whole thing in the sketch. And then I said, on second thought, don't worry because I am never going to do this character again.
Okay, here's my last question because you've been so generous with your time. What's your favorite character you've ever played?
Well, I love all the movie takeoffs we did, but I was always happy when we had a Eunice sketch, when I did Eunice, and I was always happy. Poor, pitiful Eunice. And I love doing Mrs. Wiggins with Tim.
That would be like Mrs. Wiggins. Where was that accent from?
I don't know. He made it up, I think. He made it up, yeah.
Do you still do the Tarzan yell from time to time?
Sure.
Can you?
Okay, here we go.
Tomorrow, Toronto, June 14th, Regina, June 16th, Saskatoon, and June 24th, Carol is live at the Vancouver Comedy Fest. Carol Burnett, everybody. Russell Peters is next.